Who is a bad guy in history who actually wasn't really a bad guy? A lady who sued McDonald's because its coffee was hot. Stella Liebeck was 80-odd when she accidentally spilt the coffee on her lap, leaving her with third-degree burns. It was insanely hot, like 90 degrees Celsius. She was in hospital for over a week, and needed 2 years of treatment with skin grafts. I remember reading that when she died, she had no real quality of life due to the trials and treatment, and that it just paid for her to have a live-in nurse. Maybe it's a bit tangential as this was 30 years ago, and that she was seen more as stupid than bad, but it fits. Yeah, Ford was anti-Semitic earlier in his life. He walked it back long before he died, but he was at the forefront of workers' rights in America. Unions like to pretend that they are responsible for things that he did. He believed there was no point in selling cars if his own workers could not buy them. He was something that modern Redditors lack the capacity to comprehend: a complicated person who did both good and bad things, and isn't just pure evil because he had some bad race opinions in a time when that was considered normal. Jack Kevorkian. He was a right-to-die activist that was vilified and made to look like a crazy man by the media, even given the nickname Dr. Death. He deeply cared about the right to die and selflessly put his beliefs ahead of his own personal comfort. However, he was a loose cannon and was his own worst enemy. The case that finally got him in legal trouble is when he physically administered a lethal injection to a patient seeking assisted suicide. This was aired on 60 Minutes. He was subsequently charged and convicted of murder. Dowager Empress Cixi of China. She's considered the bad guy by the Chinese because she had to drag the country into the modern age against thousands of years of tradition. She was being absolutely fucked by England, France, Russia and Japan, and had no choice but to modernize the country in order to survive. When England started a war for opium a few decades earlier, they were using guns and artillery, and China was still using martial arts. She made decisions that were unpopular in China at the time but had no choice. King Richard III of England. He was the subject of a sustained character assassination, not least by William Shakespeare, who wrote a play about him over a century after he died. There's no evidence that Richard was involved in the deaths of the princes in the Tower, and during his short reign, he introduced a number of reforms that proved quite popular. Essentially, Henry Tudor, who succeeded him, had to blacken his name to consolidate his rather dubious claim to the throne. King Canute, also known as Canute, didn't try to stop the tides of water to show he was powerful at all. History has totally ignored the point he was trying to make. He was trying to show his court that he wasn't omnipotent and all-powerful, and that the tide didn't give a shit about a king. Text Canute's 20 Exercise 20 on 20. The 20 Seashore, that 20 was 20, not 20 omnipotent. Aaron Burr. The Hamilton musical tries to paint him as some sort of villain just because he opposes Hamilton. In reality, he had pretty progressive views for the time, and Hamilton wasn't as great the musical or book it's based on would have you believe. That book was also written by someone who really has no business making biographies on historical figures. Listen to the Dollop podcast on Hamilton if you want to learn more. In the film Titanic, the character Murdoch killed someone, took bribes, and generally came across as a right shit. He was a real-life person who was actually a hero and saved many lives. His living relatives were so disgusted that the VP of Fox traveled to Dalbeattie to personally apologize and presented a £5,000 donation to Dalbeattie High School to boost the school's William Murdoch Memorial Prize. Xerxes, or the Persians in general, only invaded after Athens incited supported a revolt by a failed satrap in Anatolia, also only wanted to punish Athens. People lived more free and better lives under the Persians, be it Ionian Greek or Persians themselves. Edit forgot to mention the Greeks burned down Sardis for no reason as well. The burning of Athens was also revenge for that. Eda Nobunaga. He was the great unifier of Japan, and an actual great statesman daimyo. He revitalized the economy of his territories by letting merchants trade in them, and travel between cities freely. But in anime, manga, video games, he's portrayed as a sort of tyrant. I guess it's understandable. The guy literally calls himself as the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven. Reza Pahlavi. People believe some nonsensical myth that the US overthrew a democratic government in Iran in 1953 and replaced it with a tyrannical Shah. The truth is that the Pahlavi dynasty had been around for decades prior to the 1950s, and that the Shah, not the Prime Minister, was the true head of state. The Pahlavi regime was much better than the Islamic Republic. I think Richard Jewell qualifies. Jewell. The FBI ruined the guy's life, despite the fact that he saved lives, by smearing him and releasing that he was a suspect in planting the bomb. Someone else was finally convicted 9 years later and a couple years before Jules' death. The most recent film adaptation of Little Women, directed by Greta Gerwig, portrays an editor at Roberts Brothers Publishers as trying to cheat Louisa May Alcott. In real life, he advised her to take royalties for the book rather than a lump sum, and later in life she said she was grateful to him because that decision made her a rich woman. Napoleon. He is thought of as a conqueror, but in reality, he only started 2 wars, and didn't do especially well in either. Almost all of his conquests came as a result of someone declaring war on France, and losing so badly that France actually became bigger. And, what was Napoleon supposed to do? Lose one out of politeness? Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Sobel, former CO of Easy Company, 506th Infantry 101st Airborne. A hard man and probably a huge dick, but not a bad guy, and responsible for creating a cohesive unit that was able to do great things. They all bonded over their dislike of him, and that bond made those men what they were. Dude deserves much credit. Aaron Burr was an abolitionist, feminist, and broke monopolies. One of the few people to listen to Washington and to try to avoid a 2-party system. Then Hamilton, who was a massive post, wrote a letter before their duel claiming he would shoot up according to eyewitness didn't happen and destroyed his reputation. The entire nation of hell gassed from Killzone. They were forced to live in a toxic inhabitable environment and watch their former planet thrive. The original Hellgas might have been guilty, but by the time game takes place it's all their children's children that had fuck all to do with anything. How are the Rosenbergs not on this list? They were hanged for their crimes and considered the worst traitors since Benedict Arnold. But the world really was a safer place when the US wasn't the only country with a bomb. Edit what's with the massive downvotes? The Marquis de Sade was likely a pervert, but most witnesses say that sex was consensual. He was also a revolutionary who fought corruption, but he was vilified on the word of a single maid who changed her story many times and was found by his political enemies, most of the Black Panthers. They fed hungry kids and protected their communities. In response, the full force of the US government descended upon them with malevolent intent and destroyed not just the organization but the lives of every member. Cao. By all accounts he was a fantastic administrator who massively expanded literacy in China, but according to Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he's a mustache-twirling comedic sociopath who loves wanton murder and running from battle. Genghis Khan. His approach to warfare was merciless, of course. But as a statesman he was remarkably forward-thinking. The contributions the Mongol Empire made up revolutionizing the world badly underwritten by history. If you are a Christian, you should not perceive Judas Iscariot or Pontius Pilate as bad guys. Both played a vital role in the redeeming humanity and their only crimes are enabling God's plans. Why should they be vilified? Ulysses Grant. For decades his biographers were all Confederate sympathizers. Most of the Caesar's Roman histories are almost always written by the senatorial class who saw the Republic as the Golden Age. Chen Shi Huangdi is a famous example of someone hated in his lifetime for being a tyrant, but loved and even worshipped after it for creating one of the most enduring polities in human history, a united China. Dan Devine, Notre Dame football coach in the movie Rudy. He actually planned to let Rudy play without any prodding. The whole players turning in their jerseys thing was for dramatic effect. Vlad Dracula. He is often considered one of the most important rulers in Wallachian history and a national hero of Romania. Emphasizing his fight for the independence of the Romanian lands. Nero playing a liar while Rome burned is pure BS. He actually created a lot of good infrastructure, created the first fire department, and made laws allowing slaves to leave their masters. Ho Chi Minh was and still is regarded as a brilliant and positive revolutionary for Vietnam and Laos. To the US, he's a monster for resisting an abhorrent invading army. Not a real person but Lucifer. He was all about humans and letting them think freely. God was past he wouldn't be in control of them, so God threw a hissy fit. Ian Smith has a very undeserved reputation. He's a tragic figure. He tried to save his country from falling to communism and failed due to betrayal. The name that popped up first in my head is Edward Snowden. Far as I can tell, just a dude whistleblowing all the bad shit America does. Benedict Arnold got a bad rap. He did what he thought was right to save his fellow Americans. But history is written by the winners. Brutus. When a leader gets so drunk with power and threatens to turn a republic into an empire, somebody has to do the right thing. Senator Joseph McCarthy. A lot of misinformation about this guy is still presented as fact even after being debunked. People are really harsh on Hitler, but remember, no matter what else he did, he was the one who finally killed Hitler. Napoleon. wasn't any worse than any other leader in his time. Yet some people compare him to Hitler. Lol, the independent contractors on Death Star, they were just doing a job to feed their families. I'd say John Hinckley Jr. we would probably be a much better country now if he had succeeded. Scar from Lion King? He was the rightful king and wanted to bring back the hyenas from exile. Trump. He got elected and all I got was lower taxes and some random vaccine in record time. Al Capone used his fortune to run soup kitchens and feed the impoverished and homeless. Ernesto Che Guevara. Patria o muerte. Viva la revolución contra el imperialismo. A certain Austrian painter, winking face. Johann Allinger von Dalling. Hear me out. Hitler. Yes, he was bad, but he was also the one who took out Hitler. Hitler, has the guy that killed Hitler. It wasn't marked serious in my defense. Harvey Weinstein, great tipper and gave many a young lass their big break. Mark David Chapman. John Lennon was an unbelievably enormous asshole IRL. People shit on Hitler all the time, but hey, at least he killed Hitler. Hitler was not an actually good man. Man, I hate this man. Man. Neville Chamberlain. Wanted to stop the horrors of World War I repeating. Satan. He actually brought more fun than the hero of this story. Eve. Adam was a grown-ass man. He didn't have to eat that apple. Judas. He had to do what he did to put Jesus' plans into effect. Al-Qaeda during 9/11. The same TikTokers who support Hamas. Thanos, the dude just wanted to bring balance to the universe. Captain Bli. He was a victim of a smear campaign. Robert McNamara probably wasn't a bad guy, just an idiot.